Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Moe, aka Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today we are here with Bushmills 16 to have a little try. I started the week with some Irish whiskey, so why not continue with some? This bottle was kindly sent to me last week. It actually arrived on International Women's Day, and I had no idea it was arriving, but it was a gift from them to have a dram to Helen Mulholland, who's their master blender, which I thought was a nice gesture. I've never tried the Bushmills 16. I have the 10 here, so we can compare them. But yeah, a lot of comments have been saying Bushmills my favourite, and oh, you should try the 16, you should try this, which is always lovely to hear. And what's so interesting about this, so it says at 40% EBV, and it is matured in Oloroso sherry, bourbon, and then it's finished for about a year, I think, in port wine casks. And that means it has almost the exact same maturation as the Redbreast that I tried the other day. If you haven't seen that review, feel free to check it out. But yeah, obviously about 10 years younger, but interesting combination. I was like, should I say something else about that? No, it is interesting using that port in the combination with the sherry. I think from what I've tried before, that combination works really well. So I will be very interested to try and see, is what I was going to say, that in combination of them. But obviously Bushmills is a really old Irish whiskey distillery, and some say one of the absolute oldest. On the bottle they have 1608, so it's dating back quite a while. And I mean, there's always that kind of, everyone says there's a discussion about which came first, the Irish whiskey or the Scotch whiskey, but as far as I've heard, Ireland was first. So yeah, should we have a little try? Let's start with the nose. The first thing I'm getting is a wind, like a very soft wind of sherry, but also in the core of it, very much a grain note. So if you've ever been in a distillery, when you step into the mill room, or if you get to nose a jar of barley, that kind of note of it. Or I guess if you've just been anywhere, kind of anywhere where they mill grain to a flour or a grist or something finer, then you'd recognise this kind of this dusty, but grain dust, I guess. And a bit of mango, but like grain mango. Like the grain is taking over, but the mango note is underneath. It's not like tropical juicy mango that you might think of when you recognise a big fruitiness in a whiskey. For me, there is a mango note because there's something tropical, but the textures are different, if that makes sense. Don't know if you can get textures in scents, but that's how I see it in my head. If you have a Bushmills 16 at home, the next time you try it, think about that idea of the texture being slightly different, and see if you understand me, and let me know in the comments if you do. There's definitely a woodiness there, and there's something chemical. And when I say, I know chemical might sound bad, but it's that kind of painty note that I, in another video, kind of realised this might be acetone, but this is more like wood polish. But the biggest thing I'm getting is the grey note surrounded by mango and the sherry tones. So should we have a little taste, and then we'll compare it to the 10. Sláinte Skål. From memory, this very much has a Bushmills character. Because when I tried the 10, I also got this grain note very much in the focus, and that's what I'm getting on the palate as well. It will be fun to see if I do remember it correctly, because I am going to try in just a second. But the grain is at the core of it, which I think is quite nice to see. Because sometimes a whiskey has that kind of big fruitiness, a clear, crisp fruitiness, which I absolutely love. But it's just interesting to try something different. And this, sometimes I don't feel like you can taste the grain in it, even though you obviously know there's a grain element and that is contributing with flavour. But this just has the grain flavour in the centre. So now it smells a bit like moss after rainfall in the nose as well. What I think fun about this is that Bushmills for me tastes like a distillery that's been making whiskey back in the days, and they still kind of make a similar whiskey. I mean, they might have changed a lot of things. I'm not an expert on Bushmills history, but the way this grain flavour comes through and the way Bushmills tastes, for me, tastes like some of the whiskies that I've tried from that hasn't been newly produced, that have been produced a long time ago. It might not be matured for that long, it might be a 10-year-old, but it might have been distilled and matured in the 70s or older than that. It has this kind of character. I don't know if you agree with me. If you like Bushmills, do you agree with me on this? It's like it has an old character that they've managed to preserve. So it tastes like whiskey, at least to me. Is this coming across well? So it tastes, if I tried a whiskey that was made maybe 100 years ago, it would have elements of the same kind of flavours as what I find in Bushmills. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think it's that graininess that does it. Let's have a little taste of our 10-year-old, which is Bourbon Oloroso, 40% as well. And the 16 I could see for, I think, £78. So it's a bit higher. Let's compare. Definitely more of a sherry note coming out on the 16. I mean, that could be the kind of port sherry going hand in hand. The Bushmills 10 smells more like newly chopped wood and a bit of grassiness. And the Bushmills, if you just nose them, and the first impression is that the Bushmills 16 have more fruity tones. If you nose them, if I close my eyes, this would be light straw coloured, as a colour of, not the colour of whiskey, but as a colour representation of the aromas. And the Bushmills 16 would be more of a pastel purple. But let's try the 10 and see how that compares. Actually, Sláinte, sometimes I forget to do it and sometimes I don't. I have no consistency to that. Grassy, grainy, very much that grain in the centre, but more grassy. I wouldn't say you get necessarily... Did I say that was Oloroso? I did. I wouldn't say you get a lot of sherry, what you would recognise as classic sherry flavours coming through. I mean, the sherry might be in there not to give it a much of character, but another texture or another kind of body to it. I wouldn't say it tastes a lot like Oloroso sherry. No, not really. More bourbon derived flavours for me. Let's compare it to 16. Sláinte. Yeah, I mean, I think Bushmills is probably one of the clearest distilleries in terms of distillery character coming through. Because these both very much have that same kind of grain central heart, which is, I think you can recognise in both of them. The 16 has more of a rounded fruitiness, more sherry and that port influence instead of the grassy meets ex-bourbon notes. Yeah, I mean, if you painted a painting with these notes, you would have a circle where the grain was, slightly dry, a little bit spicy, but more spicy in that there's lots of that grain dust flavour, and not spicy as in chilies or cinnamon, if that makes sense. And then you would have more colours coming in around that circle, but they're not as thick as that core is. So you just kind of draw a coloured line, which is the grassiness, and you draw another line, and that's this kind of dry wood chopping note. And then for this one, you have the core, but then the colours leaking into the core a little bit. So it's like when you, yeah, this one, the 16 in a way feels more like the colours, like the flavours entwine a little bit more. So you do have that core, but it's like when you're painting with watercolours and you just do a little dash and it kind of bleeds out. For me today, I think I prefer the 16. It's just, sometimes grassiness in whiskey, it can be lovely, but it's often that I find that the grassiness is a little bit too almost bitter, or too takes away from the other flavours. I mean, if you watched the channel before, you probably know that I prefer a fruity whiskey often, or smoke, or something that kind of, something like that. But it's fascinating, especially trying them next to each other, to be able to see that core so clearly. I mean, I'd love to hear if you agree with me. Have you seen that kind of Bushmills core? How would you explain the distillery character of Bushmills? I'd love to find out, so please put it in the comments below. And of course, please let me know if there's any other whiskies you would recommend to me, or that you'd like to see reviewed next. And of course, if you do like the channel and you'd like to support me, I would be so over the moon if you consider using my affiliate links the next time you're shopping with either Master Malt, the Whisky Exchange, or the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Those links are in the description here below, as well as links to my other social channels if you're curious about those. But if you don't care about any of those things, then of course a thumbs up and maybe subscribing if you haven't already would of course be very much appreciated as well. I also want to end with saying a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters on Patreon. I am so grateful to have you guys with me on my whiskey journey. But I hope you've all had an absolutely wonderful day. Sláinte Skål!